A detransitioner just won $2 million dollars in a landmark lawsuit, the first time a jury verdict has been issued around this deeply contentious issue. Chloe, how you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I want to start with you. Obviously, you have a journey that we're going to get into in a moment, detransitioning yourself. But when you look at this case, this landmark case, what does it mean to you?
I think that she deserves every single bit of justice that she's going to get from this. And honestly, she deserves a lot more than $2 million. But this is an amazing start for the detransition community. And it's a massive leap from here on out because I think that this is a precedental moment in the court system for us.
Yeah, and Mark, I want to come to you on this because obviously, legally speaking, looking at this is making a lot of headlines because people are saying, okay, this is the first time we've seen a jury weigh in on this and award this $2 million. What happens next in your view? Because you're dealing with a lot of these cases. This is obviously not the only case. We have Chloe's case and many others. What do you think happens next?
Yeah, I mean, I think these other cases are going to continue to move forward. It's very encouraging to see this result out of New York. I think roughly there's about 28 cases that are similar across the country. I think Chloe's case is probably the most well known. For 3 years, Kaiser fought tooth and nail to keep Chloe's case out of trial. They didn't want a public trial where the media could be in there reporting. They certainly don't want a jury of peers deciding liability and damages. But we saw that happened in New York. It can happen in California as well. For 3 years, Kaiser tried to keep Chloe out of a courtroom. And I'm really, really proud that after 3 years of fighting, Chloe is going to get her day in court. And that trial date has been set. And so this is the very first verdict for a detransitioner. I expect many more to come. I think this is like big tobacco litigation. We're at the tip of the spear, and I think more and more people who have been victimized by a very predatory gender industry are going to come forward knowing that there is hope. There are people who are going to stand up for them and fight with them, and they don't have to do this alone.
Yeah, and I think this is something that in this last election cycle, a lot of Americans didn't know a lot about it, right? So you sort of hear about it and you don't really know what to think and you think, okay, but then people became very aware of it because of what was happening in education, because of the way these stories were starting to come out. People like Chloe, like you coming forward and sharing your story, and it really shifted people in profound ways and became a big election issue and a big culture issue. And so now the tides have really turned, it feels like, on this, not just with this case, but on the hearts and the minds of many Americans. Now, Chloe, you've shared your story many times before, but there are people who do not know it. And I want people to understand what you went through. So if you could just kind of take us through your initial struggles with gender and really what happened to you.
Yes, so I'm an advocate for banning these procedures for children and for really changing the entire protocol around it because I think that to do this to anybody, for a doctor to sit somebody down and tell them that, yes, their feelings of insecurity are real, that they were born in the wrong body, and the only way to fix themselves is by going through cruel, unusual, and experimental medicine that they will be beholden to for the rest of their life. I think that this is an industry that absolutely deserves to be taken down. And this is something that comes from primarily my own experience with going through these procedures as a child myself. I had a very similar case to Varian, actually, where I too was struggling with mental health issues, and I had insecurities around my body, around being female, around my femininity, and rather than being guided through these feelings that I think, other than the traumas I was experiencing, were very developmentally normal, I was led down a route of irreversible pain by my doctors. And that included going through puberty blockers and starting weekly testosterone injections at the age of 13 before I graduated middle school. And thus,
13,
yes,
13 years old. Okay.
these were chemical castration agents that they put me on, and I basically went through menopause, and my puberty was completely disrupted from that point on, before I was even in high school. And at 15 years old, I underwent a radical double mastectomy to get rid of my breasts. Now, I realized at 16 that I wanted to become a mother. And I was also starting to get a little bit older. I was starting to mature a little bit and really start to think about my adulthood from a little bit of a more grown up lens and what I would really want. And I came to the conclusion that this is something that was actually bringing me harm psychologically, spiritually, of course, physically. And to this day, I still don't know whether I'm going to be having children or not. And I also had a coming to faith later, after a few years after I detransitioned as well. So I am not only somebody who has been through this, a lot of my worldview now has that was previously filled by transgenderism has been replaced by my faith, my relationship with God. And I, like Varian, I had some mental health issues. I had undiagnosed body dysmorphia, quite like she did. And I also had I was struggling to socialize and to get along with other women and other girls. But nothing that I was experiencing as a 13-year-old girl meant that I deserved to have my childish misgivings about growing up lead into something that would permanently disrupt that process. And I think that every child who is put through this deserves the very best, and they deserve to get the treatment afterward that they deserve. They deserve a healthy off ramp, and they need to be protected from these procedures. And in order to do that, we are going to have to not only ban this, but also really discourage these doctors and scare them out of ever thinking about doing this to children ever again through the courts.
Chloe, you said so many things there, and I'm so sorry for what you have gone through. When you were 15 going through that surgery, and a year later questioning. I mean, that's why when you're a child, you are unable to make decisions that are so profound on multitudes of other issues, right? On this issue, I want people to focus on that at 15, you undergo radical surgery, right? And within a year of that, you're pondering motherhood, you're pondering the future. Decisions were permanently made on your body by doctors. And I want to talk about another factor, the family decision here. And I'm sure they were pushed into it and tricked into it. That happened, and within a year, you wanted to change your mind. And that is why this is so detrimental and dangerous that we have allowed this to happen to people like you. I mean, what a sad state of our society that all of us have allowed this to go on. Now, people, I'm sure, ask you, well, why did your parents allow it? What was going on there? Obviously, the parents had to consent to it. Can you help people understand that part of this process? Because I think that's very foreign to people, and they don't quite understand how that part happens.
I would argue that even from a legal standpoint, I question whether my mom and dad really consented or not, because yes, they wrote down the signature on the forms, but they were under duress to do so. They were told that my life would be on the line, that it was very likely that I would become suicidal and potentially even attempt to take my own life if I wasn't given early enough intervention. And they were told this not just once. They had this crammed down their throat at basically every corner, every doctor that they spoke to about this. And I think that is one of the absolute worst fears that every parent experiences with their child. Nobody wants to experience the loss of their child. And when you're being told over and over again by people who have degrees on the wall, who in previous decades we thought that we could trust, that is heartbreaking. I don't want to imagine what my mom and dad went through, and I understand why people are so quick to blame them, but it also makes me very upset because I think that they went through probably nearly as much pain as I did, watching me first being sold a lie and then watching me become a husk of who I was, and then seeing me come out of that process with regret. And it was something that really, it screwed up our relationship for a while because they didn't know what to do with me, and the guidance that they were being given by the professionals was just, it was plain wrong. it's something that has, thankfully, we've been able to recover from as a family, and we're in a much better place now. But I forgive my mom and dad for what they did under the circumstances, because they really were doing the best with what they could with what they were given, which unfortunately it wasn't very much that these doctors were giving them, not even in properly informed consent.
I thank you for sharing that. And I asked you the question because of, and you answered it perfectly. I don't think people realize the manipulation, emotional manipulation that goes on in these circumstances. Your child's going to kill themselves if you don't do this. And you're trusting doctors and medical professionals and mental health providers to give you the best possible information. It's very hard. We could sit here all day and say we shouldn't, I should be a journalist and I shouldn't have an opinion on it. What you're describing is so morally, ethically wrong. I just can't, again, I can't believe that we're even in this position of having to deal with what you've had to deal with and even talking about it. But, Mark, I want to come to you on this because you are looking at so many of these cases and dealing with them. What is it that motivates, from your perspective, the medical professionals? Is it they think they're doing the right thing? Is it money? Is it a mixture of things? What is it that is driving this?
I think it's a mixture of things. I think, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of funding in it. There's a lot of money to be made for this, what they call gender affirming care industry, right? And there's been a few like hot mic moments where doctors have not realized their microphone was on and they're talking about how this is a cash cow. And because of that, there's been a lot of pushback. I think there's also just this blind allegiance to this ideology without doing any due diligence. And that's really scary when we have medical professionals and regulating medical boards that are providing guidance to practitioners in hospitals who have real contact with patients, but they're not doing their due diligence themselves. In fact, there was I guess it's been a few years now, where WPATH, one of these regulating bodies, there was these documents, these Zoom calls that were leaked. And what the public learned from that was that WPATH, which is providing guidance to hospitals and to doctors, actual practitioners, that's an organization that's comprised not just of medical professionals, but people who have zero medical training at all. People who are just activists. And they're impacting how doctors are treating patients, vulnerable kids. And I think if these doctors are doing their due diligence and treating the comorbidities, the mental health issues, then I think we'd have a lot different outcomes. I think what we're seeing globally, European countries taking a really hard stand, either outright banning these barbaric treatments on minors or severely restricting them. And they're right to do so because these are evidence-based conclusions that these countries have come to. What we're seeing in the US is something that has been a little bit different, where they've really been driven, I think, by political pressure, by a lot of money. And unfortunately, people like Chloe have had to pay the price for that. And so that's why this lawsuit for Chloe is so important, because Chloe deserves justice. And every one of these kids who have been victimized, they deserve justice too.
Chloe, what would you say to young people right now who might be where you were at age 15, at age 13, who are struggling? They're unsure. They are experiencing some of the same mental health issues that you were. They're questioning their gender, and they're thinking about maybe taking some of the steps that you took. What would your message be, not just to those young people, but to their parents and those around them who are scared, much like your parents were?
When I speak to young people who are confused and seeking counsel around their sex confusion, I tell them that these feelings are not insurmountable if you don't go through the transition process. It's very much the opposite. I learned through my own experience that it was never going to help me in the long term to run away from my problems and to choose not to face them, to run away from reality. It often actually makes those things worse. So you have to face them head on. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to ask, why do I feel this way about myself? And you're never alone. if you need help in doing so, if you need to talk to your parents about it, which I think is really the first place that you should go when you're experiencing these feelings, and really explore where they're coming from. But it's, I think, part of the process of growing into an adult to sometimes be confused about who you are, and I think to be a little bit distressed about the responsibilities that come from either growing into a man from a boy or into a woman from a girl. It's a confusing process all around, and for some people, especially those of us who are different, who look differently, who think differently, who behave differently, it can be just a little bit more difficult, and that's okay. I think that difficulty in life is, it's not something to run away from. It's something that builds character, and you have to move with the tide. You have to learn to surf with it, and it's never too late to go back. No matter how far you've gone to the process, there is never a point in time, whether you've already had your puberty blocked, whether you've already been on hormones for a few months or a few years, or even if you've already had surgery, there is a way back for you to embrace the way that God has beautifully created you.
Final question for you, Chloe. Just as you mentioned earlier, you weren't sure, that dream that you had at 16 of having children, that you're not sure that that is something that can happen for you or that will happen for you. How do you deal with that uncertainty? How do you navigate that in light of where you are and what has gone on?
I mean, that's something that it's sort of been put on the back burner, as it's not part of my life yet, but it is something that it's very stressful to think about. And some days it's harder than others, but I recognize that there are some things that are not in my hands. Like a big part of the process of healing from the trauma of transitioning, as well as the feelings of confusion around my sex itself, has been choosing to radically accept things as they are, rather than the way that I may wish they could have been. And it could happen. I have a lot of friends who have been through the same process, and thankfully they have been able to conceive and have healthy, happy, beautiful children of their own. And whether it happens or not, I'm happy to become a mother in whatever form that looks like, whether I naturally have children of my own and I can conceive, or if I have to adopt one day. Because I think that motherhood is motherhood, and the option should never have been taken away from me. It should never be taken away from any child. But I think that every family is beautiful in whatever form. And that is the thing that I want to fight for the most. And I have been dedicating my life towards for the last few years. Not just defending the rights of other families across the country, but also what started my journey of speaking out in the first place was really my nieces and nephews coming to the world for the first time, seeing the beauty of their innocence, and wishing that one day they could grow up, and my own children can grow up in a culture that was much better than the one that I did.
Well, Chloe, thank you for sharing all of that. And it's been a journey that you've been on, and appreciate you speaking up. Mark, I want to leave you with the final word on this, since you're dealing with the legal elements of these cases. What do you want to leave people with on this important issue?
I just want people to know that there's a lot of momentum right now. 3 years ago, when we announced Chloe's lawsuit, it was really Chloe standing out in front of the world by herself. We were certainly with her, but it's her name on the lawsuit. She was the one who was, I think, taking the brunt in the media. And as a result of her courage, we're seeing so many others come forward, knowing that they're not alone, that there is an opportunity for justice. We're seeing states, more than 20 states, have passed some form of a Chloe's Law to protect minors from this type of barbaric treatment in hospitals, this type of abuse. We're seeing in the halls of Congress in Washington, D.C., legislation introduced and being discussed that would protect and provide a right of action federally. We're seeing a lot of momentum, and that's really encouraging to know. So to all the listeners, thank you so much for supporting Chloe. Thank you for supporting other detransitioners like her. To stay up to date on Chloe's lawsuit, you can visit our website at libertycenter.org for all the latest on the case.
Thank you both so much for taking the time today. Really, truly appreciate it.
Thanks.